Welcome back to Business and Politics. We're talking to Mr. George Royeca of Angkas. Sir, you guys have been doing quite a bit on safety, riding safety. But before I get to what you guys are doing specifically, I've read somewhere that about half or more than half of the motor vehicle deaths involve two-wheel vehicles, motorcycles. You know, some people have been telling me that, you know, because of the numbers, that it may be legitimate to say that motor vehicle safety has become a public health concern. What's your view on that?
No, definitely. I think during that time, LTO's main argument, or at least the regulators as a whole, not just LTO, was that 50%, the number was, if I could recall correctly, 50% of all fatalities were motorcycle related.
Okay.
And I think just inherently, right, just if you have a thought experiment, you know, motorcycles are exposed, you know, your body is exposed to the elements more so than a car. Right. So a minor accident in a motorcycle can be fatal, whereas a big accident in a car may be very minimal.
At least you have airbags, or at least some protection.
Correct.
Right.
So I think that was the common I guess knowledge or that time, right? And we had to change that mindset.
Yeah, and I think there's also that culture, at least in Asia, not just the Philippines, right? You have your kid, your dog, and maybe several sacks of grain in the back. I mean, it's common, right? It's not just in the Philippines. It's common. But how big of a problem is safety consciousness, I guess, in the Philippines? You
know, when we first launched the product, in about 6 months' time, we were doing very, very well. We really had a hockey stick growth, and there was wide acceptance and very, very high response rate, towards, how good the product is to them. And then when we got shut down by the government for the first time, we didn't understand. That's
the difficult thing about entrepreneurship, isn't it? I mean, you're ahead of the laws, and they don't know how to deal with you. So the only solution is stop. But anyway, we'll get to that in a minute.
That's true. Though, to be fair, regulation always lags behind innovation in every country that you're in. Right. So it's just a matter of how regulators treat that, which will...
Yeah, I'll get back to that.
Let's get back to the discussion on that.
Let's get back to the safety.
But where was I at? So there was really... So we were wondering why. We thought it was just, them trying to stifle innovation. But then when we went around, we saw the numbers, we saw the statistics, and we saw habal-habals and skylabs in the provinces. When you have a plank on each side and you have like literally 10 people going up the mountain on the slope, right?
I love these nicknames, Skylab.
Skylab. So very skillful drivers, but I guess applied in the worst possible way, right? That is innovation nonetheless. How unfortunately it was dangerous, and even in the general public, there were already monikers, right? Buwis buhay, or kalahati ng katawan mo nakabaon na sa hukay, right? So that was a general sentiment around motorcycles, and this is because it wasn't really regulated, and as we know, there is no training or no institutionalized training for motorcycles anywhere in the country. So you get your license coming off of a tricycle, right? Imagine growing up with a tricycle, you take out the sidecar, it's still a tricycle in your head. And when you're in a tricycle, there's no helmet, right? There's no need for it. There's no, you can put in more than one passenger, and it never falls. Right? So you apply that now to a population that has to balance on two wheels with no formal education, then that's really a recipe for disaster. But what we've proven, and this was our 6-year-long or even 3 to 6 to 5-year-long battle, was that when we really started training, and we've trained to close to, I think, more than 200,000 applicants already. These are motorcycle drivers. We've failed over 70%. But the training is free. If we were a school, we'd be the largest school in the entire country. What we've realized is, once you train them, once you equip them with the proper tools, once you give them the rationale why the safety equipment is necessary, you give them a safety training so that they're more conscious around, safety precautions. Then they actually start following. It's not as if they were not following or they were considered kamote because they wanted to do so. It was just lack of any knowledge.
That's an interesting point, because there was a time when I had some visitors from abroad, and surprised to see, motorcycles passing you left and right.
Hitting your side mirror.
Well, not even that, but just not seemingly following the lanes. Yeah. But you can't get mad at them, because my observation was, and let me ask you about this, right? My observation was that they don't think that they were doing anything wrong. That was just what they were used to. That's right. What they learned when they were driving, picking up this. Is that your observation?
Yes, and I've always said this. Whether I speak to a regulator, I'm speaking to a LGU, or I'm speaking to to a general conference, is that this is a systemic issue.
Okay.
This is our failure as an institution, right? To be able to train our drivers, our motorists, right? I mean, if you're untrained in a car, you're likely to get away with it, right? Without a hitch, you may live your life without any type of major injuries to yourself. But for a motorcycle, the risk is exponentially higher. And what was happening is we were selling motorcycles, indiscriminately, because it is the cheaper alternative. It was seen as a way to uplift, yourself from poverty. If you're able to buy a motorcycle, it's your side hustle, it's your family car, it's your business car as well. You drive it to work and whatnot. But there's zero training, so that's why it became so rampant.
But you were, I think, mentioning some pretty interesting statistics about your success rate. The safety record of the people you trained. What's that number?
So after millions of rides, right? Remember, we're coming from 50% of all fatalities, right? Motorcycle related. For us, after millions of rides, because of the training that we implemented, our accident rate was 0.003%, less than 1%.
Wow.
So what we proved is that, ang Pinoy, pag tinuruan mo ng tama, pag pinag-aral mo, pag binigyan mo ng magandang sistema, equip them with the right tools, that they become productive citizens of the country. This is really...
And they protect their livelihood, not only their... And we're talking about traffic, they cause less traffic.
Correct. Marami nagsasabi, bakit ang Pilipino pag nasa Amerika nagiging sumusunod? Yeah. And that's the reason, because there is an education system there. They are made aware of these things. A lot of our drivers, these are good drivers. They've been driving for 10 years, right? They've been driving for 10 years, even some of them more than that. Simple road signs were amiss, right? They were like a little bit confused, and that is because
it's
the
difference in yield and stop.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right. So it's just getting that safety mindset in place. Imagine growing up on a tricycle that you don't need to do anything, just hop on it and drive off. Right. And there's no formal training. It's the same. It's the same thing.
I found it interesting. I had a friend who was, I think, from Europe, was going to buy a motorcycle, and they were telling me that in his country, in order for him to be able to legally own a motorcycle, he had to go through some training, and it's not so different from, I suppose, what you offer, and with similar success rates, right? Fewer fatalities, better traffic management, of course, better public health, issues. Isn't there a lesson for LGUs? I think, isn't there a lesson there for LGUs to pick up from what you guys? I mean, less than 1% success rate of all of them. I mean, isn't that something that should catch some attention? Or have they been catching attention? Are you talking to any?
I mean,
are you talking to any?
We've been working with a lot of the LGUs in terms of the safety training of not only their employees, but also their constituency. In fact, we just recently concluded last year a program with TESDA. We created their curriculum for motorcycles for business. So TESDA had this really great curriculum for truck drivers. You go to TESDA, it's a vocational course, and then they place you for trucks, and then that becomes your source of livelihood. So we did the exact same thing for motorcycles, and I was looking at it, and I was talking to the then Secretary of TESDA, and it was funny because we've really come full circle, right? From being on the other side of the fence, trying to get banned by the government, now working hand in hand,
working with government,
and actually certifying their trainers, right, to teach this motorcycle for business course. And we've worked with a lot of the LGUs and continue working with the LGUs to really adopt the safety mindset, because you cannot take it out of the population. This is the most affordable type of vehicle that they can buy. And this is something that's integral to their economic success, which is why it's rampant. And outside of Metro Manila, Dante, the ratio between motorcycles to cars is 18:1.
Right.
Right? So it's when you go outside of Metro Manila, the capital,
you'll see
it's
more.
a motorcycle country. We are a motorcycle country. You know, 50% of all cars are in Metro Manila.
How long does your training require? I mean, how many?
Our training is quick because we only train people with enough experience.
Okay.
Right? So you actually need to have a professional driver's license.
Okay.
And because of this, that would imply that you've been driving for at least a year.
Okay.
To be able to upgrade to one. So we're already training people that know how to ride a motorcycle, and that takes about a day for us to train them, both practical and theoretical exams.
And despite that, a very good success rate.
Very good success rate, but also a very high failure rate.
Okay.
But our training is free, so they get to go back and retrain again and retrain until they pass our standards.
And is it something that they have to do every year? Do they have to get certified every year or every so often? Or
so we have a refresher course that we implement across the board with our bikers, and then we also have a series of trainings all year round, especially when there are some infractions. So when they do get an infraction somewhere or somebody complains, they go back to the office and then we do a retraining or a refresher course with them. So training is continuous. It doesn't stop when they get hired.
Right. And I'm just thinking again, you know, the lessons that government can learn from you guys. I'm wondering if you think it's timely now to suggest to government, we have a new LTO chief, we have a fairly new president, right? That maybe there should be that added layer of certification, maybe, to grant someone a license to drive a two-wheeled vehicle, like a motorcycle?
Yeah,
you think that's practical?
Very, very practical. But you need to make it affordable or even free.
How do you make it affordable for you guys?
Work with the private sector. The private sector will always find a way. Right? I mean, the private sector can play that role, and they can have, like, just like cars, there's accredited schools all over, but create the system and create the parameters to be able to make that happen. But I think there's already some efforts in place for these types of certifications, and many congressmen and senators have already filed their respective bills to ensure that when you buy a motorcycle that you go through some level of training.
Right. Now, you said you have, well, you know, in addition to the impressive success rate, you had a high failure rate, right? So what are some of the most common things besides, again, not knowing the road signs? What are the more common, I guess, driving myths that they have that lead to, like, risky behavior on the road?
I think ultimately it's the operation of the motorcycle, right? So a lot of them try to rush through certain obstacles. So we actually have a practical course that mimics real world scenarios, like the actual dangers on the road, whether it's a plant that you're traversing or there's speed bumps along the way. So things like this that will make you will force you to mishandle and lose balance the motorcycle. So you need to have a certain level. Now, let me qualify that, right? We fail 70% of applicants because we have a very high standard and rigorous training for commercial operations.
You don't want them to get hurt, right?
For commercial operations. But for regular private operations, the standard is much lower, right? All of them know how to ride a motorcycle. All of them generally have that knowledge of riding a motorcycle, but it's really much higher standard in terms of, you know, putting a passenger, you know, the general public on your back or behind you, and, you know, riding them from one place to another in a safe manner.
Right. Well, very interesting. We'll continue in a little while. We're talking to Mr. George Royeca, CEO of Angkas. Please stay tuned.